Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Croccast podcast. I'm your host, Nate, and today I'm joined by Will, a lab technician at the Georgia Sea Turtle Center. Will, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, let's get started by talking about how you first got into reptiles and kind of your career path up to this point.
Sure. I actually kind of had a different path than a lot of people. I went to college, got my bachelor's of science and biology. Originally, really wanting to go to med school. So originally wanted to be a genetic counselor, looking at genetic diseases. Kind of dipped my toe into more wildlife focused classes, and then found my passion for marine biology, and then kind of shifted focus looking towards researching corals, and did a lot of coral research in undergrad with ocean acidification. And then it kind of led into the realm of sea turtles, which is what I'm doing currently. And I took a sea turtle biology class in undergrad, and I have been doing it ever since the summer of 2019. So I kind of randomly took this class. I was like, hey, that looks fun, and found my passion of it. Then found my passion of wildlife conservation and working with amazing reptiles.
So, what all do you do at the research center?
Yeah, so down here on Jekyll Island, Georgia, at the Georgia Sea Turtle Center, I am one of three research technicians here. So we just said goodbye to some of our other seasonal people. We had five Research AmeriCorps members. If you're not familiar with the program, it's basically a Peace Corps, but US based, so they're service members. So we had five of those people. They were helping us out throughout the center, or throughout the sea turtle nesting season. And then my primary job was working on our dawn patrol shifts and leading those crews, and coordinating with our night patrol team, who's out from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. And then I come in at around 5:30 into the office. We kind of transfer over, debrief what happened that night, and then I go back on during the day from 6 a.m. until we're finished with the beach. We have, checking all the nests that we have currently laid on the beach, documenting any new nests that we have, any signs of predation, that being, raccoons, ghost crabs, unfortunately, dogs every now and then. Thankfully, we haven't had an issue with that this season. And going through collecting all the scientific data that we need. We're getting different habitat measurements. We're taking latitude, longitudes of where these nests are. Getting a lot of in-depth details of several different projects that we're running. So it's kind of a little bit of chaos, but getting all that data, getting back out from the field, washing down our vehicles, inputting all of our data. And kind of the heavy intensive months of sea turtle nesting season are May through the end of July. That's our primary nesting season. So we're going nonstop, constantly, kind of frantically running around, collecting data, entering that data. Then towards August, September, October is when we're in our primary hatching season. So we've had all the nests that are going to get laid. We don't have any more getting laid. They're starting to hatch out. And after all that happens, once we've documented these nests to hatch, we're actually going to go in 5 days post hatch, per our protocols here in Georgia. And we're going to dig up those eggs, count all those hatched eggs, unhatched eggs, live or dead hatchlings. And we're also staging any of our undeveloped eggs to see as to what developmental stage they were at, and potentially answer questions like, why were these unhatched eggs in this area more developed than others? So we can potentially better understand how these sea turtles are nesting and how they are, effectively reproducing and contributing to their population.
So, what species of sea turtles nest on the Georgia coast?
Yeah, so about 99% of what we see here in Georgia is loggerhead sea turtles. They're one of seven species. So not familiar, there are seven species of sea turtle in the world. We're lucky enough in Georgia to actually have five of those seven in our coastal waters, but our primary nesters are those loggerhead sea turtles. Occasionally we get the rare green sea turtle or leatherback. I think in other islands throughout the coast of Georgia, there's been documented of green nests. I think we're sitting for the state overall, we have 7 green sea turtle nests, and the rest of them, total of about 4,000 right now, are loggerheads.
Gotcha. So, it's the first time I had a sea turtle biologist or anyone knows any work with sea turtles on. So, just want to ask for the listeners, what are some of the main threats that are facing sea turtle populations at the moment?
Yeah, there's a lot of threats. You know, once they're adults, so we'll talk about adult sea turtles and the threats that they face right now. One of their primary threats is us humans. We're out there doing commercial fishing. You might not think of it. You might live in the middle of Ohio in the U.S. and you have a direct impact on sea turtles in the world. You go to the grocery store and you're buying potentially a plastic bag, or not using sustainable resources, and you're contributing. Eventually, those plastic bags aren't going to biodegrade. They're going to get into, unfortunately, potentially into our waterways and into the ocean. And one of the favorite snacks of some of our sea turtles, specifically leatherback sea turtles, they primarily eat jellyfish. And plastic bags in the ocean and jellyfish in the ocean, if you look at a picture side by side, they're very similar. And our turtles can't really tell that. Another main threat to them are commercial fishery industries. So shrimping industries, long line fisheries, where we're setting out very long lines of fishing hooks into the ocean, leaving them there for hours. Some of these sea turtles are very hungry. They see a free snack floating in the water. They're going to get, unfortunately, hooked on those. And, a lot of these long lines are being left in the water for several hours. Sea turtles, they are reptiles. They do need to breathe air. So they're not like fish. They don't have gills. So they do need to surface from the water to take a breath before diving back down. And if they're, they can hold their breath for a very long time. But, if they're stressed out on a hook, they're unfortunately probably going to pass away. And then the same with shrimping trawl industries. So we're putting these big, large nets into the waterways that are trawling along the bottom of our, coastal areas, catching shrimp. And unfortunately, there's a lot of bycatch in those fishing industries. Thankfully, in the state of Georgia, we have these things called TEDs. They're called turtle excluder devices. It's basically a big metal grate that's at the front of one of these large trawl nets. And if a sea turtle or a larger other, potentially marine mammal gets trapped in these nets, they're going to hit that metal grate, and there's kind of a trap chute that's out the bottom of that net that allows those turtles or other animals to escape without getting caught in the net. Lets all the other shrimp and other fish get caught in the net, but it excludes those turtles. So those were actually originally developed here in Georgia by a fisherman named Sticky Boone. He's worked with University of Georgia and developed these turtle exclusion devices, and they're actually state required here in Georgia waters. So a lot of other states that are surrounding Georgia actually have implemented regulations as well using these TEDs. But in the state of Georgia, if you buy locally sourced shrimp, you can rest assured that they're actually turtle friendly. So we have really great fishing regulations here in the state of Georgia. Some other threats to sea turtles that they face in the wild, one of their main predators as adults are sharks. So we do see occasionally some shark bite injuries on a lot of our nesting females that come up. But our primary kind of risk to our sea turtles is the shrimping industries, other fishing industries, and recreational boating. So we have sea turtles that come up with boat strike injuries. So they have propeller wounds across their top part of their shell, or what we call carapace. So it's unfortunate, but it does happen. But we can do things to mitigate that. So looking at how your fishing industries are sourcing their supplies. So going to your local restaurant, be like, hey, do you know where this shrimp came from? So you have a better understanding of where the regulations taken to protect sea turtles while these fish were caught, where these shrimp were caught. And then, if you're out on the water, enjoying a nice day in your, personal boat, abide by those, no wake zones, or abide by those boating speed limits. And just having a watchful eye of these sea turtles that are coming up to the surface of the water. So, not having those negative interactions. So there's a lot of things we can do, as humans, as our part to protect and conserve these animals. Not just, being directly involved in the conservation, but just little things you can do every day, like, taking a reusable shopping bag to the grocery store will help out these animals.
Yeah, and I'm already allergic to shellfish, so I'm already doing my part.
There you go. That's funny.
So, with loggerheads making up the vast majority of nesting turtles in Georgia, uh, what are some things that set them apart from the 6 other species?
Yeah, something that is very iconic about loggerheads. We always kind of joke around and call them our crusty ladies or crusty lads. They're one of the sea turtles that gets the most what we call epibiota. It's just things that's growing on their shells. Could be barnacles, algae, crabs that are growing on their carapace or plastron all over the rest of their body. So that's very iconic for a loggerhead species. As well as they have just massive skull. I mean, that's how they got the name loggerhead, is just their skull compared to the rest of the species of sea turtles is just massive.
Gotcha. So, a lot of it's been made over the years of onshore, like building lighting and stuff like that, being detrimental to sea turtle hatchlings. Could you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, it is actually really detrimental to not only sea turtle hatchlings, but the adults as well. So thankfully here on Jekyll Island, we have a lighting ordinance, and a lot of other places around the East Coast and nesting beaches around the world have these lighting ordinances as well that basically state here on Jekyll that any beachfront property that be, public residents or private residents, sorry, public buildings like restaurants, hotels, and even street lamps that are, right adjacent to the beach have to have a specific lighting that is in a specific wavelength of light that is considered to be turtle friendly. So usually these lights are more amber kind of red colors. These wavelengths of light are, they're not invisible to sea turtles, but they are less, noticeable with their spectrum of vision. So having these turtle-friendly lights on the beaches is really great. We want to make sure those beaches are nice and dark for those turtles. Specifically, our hatchlings, when they do, emerge out of their nest, they're looking for not only the lowest horizon, but also the brightest horizon. And in the most natural setting, that's always going to be the water. So we either have starlight reflecting off the water or moonlight reflecting off the water. And those hatchlings are going to orient to the brightest horizon, which hopefully is the water. And if we have hotels or people walking on the beach with a white flashlight, that's actually going to disturb these these hatchlings and cause them to misorient. So we've actually, even though we do have great lighting ordinance here on Jekyll, where the beachfront properties have to have these turtle friendly lighting, we still have incidences from lighting in downtown Brunswick, which is our mainland right off Jekyll, and on another island north to us on St. Simons, who has a little bit different lighting ordinance. So we have a lot of what we call sky glow, or where you're on the beach and you look up and the sky is just bright. It is lit up like a Christmas tree. These hatchlings are, even though these lights are 10, 15 miles away from the beach, these hatchlings are still getting misoriented based off those lights. Thankfully, we still have a lot of great efforts here on Jekyll that our majority of our hatchlings do go straight out to the water. But yeah, lighting is a big issue, not only with the hatchlings, but as well as the female nesting turtles.
Yeah. So, with turtle nesting, one of their major threats to species as a whole be development of nesting beaches.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, definitely developmental areas. We see just case in point on Jekyll, we have a kind of a 1/3, 2/3 rule of the island. So basically states 1/3 of the island can be developed or developmental areas. So that being, private residences, roads, sidewalks, hotels, restaurants, and then 2/3 of it has to remain undeveloped. And we see a large nesting population of our loggerhead sea turtles nesting on the more undeveloped side of our island than we do on the kind of more developed side of our island. And we look at islands in comparison to us, like St. Simon's is heavily developed. They have hotels on every single square block, of property on St. Simon's. And this year on Jekyll, we currently have 243 loggerhead sea turtle nests, and our neighbors to the north, who have, they're maybe 3 miles away from us, separated by 3 miles of water. I could think they have 22, and that's just those large numbers is very drastic on how many we have here versus on St. Simon's, and we can attribute to that to more developmental areas having that kind of negative impact on their nesting populations.
So, we want to go over some of the history of the Georgia Sea Turtle Research Center.
Yeah, so the Georgia Sea Turtle Center opened in 2007. So we actually celebrated our 15th year anniversary this past summer, which is very exciting. But sea turtle conservation has actually been going on since the early 1980s on Jekyll consistently. And we've actually have one of the largest and longest running sea turtle nesting and tagging programs in anywhere in the world, which is really awesome to be a part of. We have data that goes back to the early 1950s. And we've actually have a documentation of potentially, we like to believe that is the first tag that was ever put on a loggerhead sea turtle back in 1958. Back then, they were a little bit different tags than we use currently, but we do have a record of that tag and what turtle it was put on. So, Jekyll and Georgia as a state has been doing sea turtle conservation for many, many years, and we're starting to see the payoffs of those, conservation efforts that were implemented in the 1980s. Now with our, recovery in numbers, and here on Jekyll with the Sea Turtle Center, we've been running since 2007 up to now. And every single year we've had, night patrols and dawn patrols running the beaches basically 24/7. Through the months of May through October.
Gotcha. So you mentioned like with plastic bags being a potential impaction threat to specifically leatherbacks, but that kind of brings to the diet. And so, like, what's like the natural history and diets of these turtles?
Sure. So I guess we'll go down the list. So with our loggerhead sea turtles, they're primarily, more eating crustaceans like horseshoe crabs or knobbed whelks. So they're going for more of those crunchy, hard organisms. Occasionally munch on, the nice fish or some jellyfish. And then our green sea turtles, they get their nickname not based off the color of their shell, but actually the fat pads that they have underneath their shell are stained green from all the chlorophyll that they eat, and they're eating mainly, seagrass and algae. Their nickname is the lawnmowers of the sea, and they have a very unique skull and beak, is what we call it, those jaws right at the front. If you look at the bottom set of jaws on our green sea turtles, they actually look like little razor blades. And they're specifically through evolution designed to, munch on our seagrasses. Then our Kemp's Ridleys and Olive Ridley sea turtles, they're kind of more towards loggerheads as well. So they're eating kind of more crustaceans as well as more, fish-based diet as well. And then our flatback sea turtles all the way on the other side of the world in Australia kind of have very similar diet to that as well. Overarching with a lot of our, sea turtles are all kind of, opportunistic omnivores. So they're going after anything they can really fit in their mouth that seems tasty to them. And then moving on to like hawksbills, they're also mainly eating sponges. So they're eating sponges and corals. And then, like I said earlier, with our leatherbacks, their primary diet is jellyfish.
So with loggerheads, what are some other aspects of their natural history besides their diet?
Yeah, so some other aspects, with their ages, they're ranging. We kind of see a general, uh, very similar to humans in lifespan, so upwards of 80 to 100 years with our loggerhead sea turtles. Um, Starting their journey, starting in the months of May through July, say a loggerhead sea turtle is going to come up. She's going to do what we call body pitting, where she's kind of shimming her shell around, basically doing what we like to call a sand angel, like a snow angel, but in the sand, getting kind of that soft, fluffy sand out of the way before she starts using those rear flippers to dig out her egg chamber. Best way to describe an egg chamber is take a light bulb, turn it upside down, and that's basically exactly how a sea turtle nest looks like. So it's got a small, skinny neck, and then it rounds out at the bottom. She's going to deposit anywhere from, 45 upwards of 120, 130 eggs. And then she's going to cover them back. She's going to return to the ocean, and she is never going to see those eggs again. She's never going to come back. Those eggs are going to incubate from 45 to 60 days. So we have that kind of average 45 to 60-day period where those eggs will hatch out. And then those hatchlings are going to crawl down the beach once they emerge, run the gauntlet, get away from some ghost crabs, birds, raccoons, people with white lights on the beach, get out to the sea. And they have a reserve of fat energy stored up in their yolk sac. So when they're in their nest, when they first kind of break out of their egg shell, they're going to use a little egg tooth, what we call a caruncle. It's right on the front of their nose. They're going to split open that egg. They're going to actually sit there for a few days, absorbing that egg yolk. And then they're all going to start to kind of shimmy their way around. Everybody's going to get really active in the nest, and then they'll come up through the nest and do what we call boil, where basically the sand looks like it's boiling because of all these sea turtle babies coming out and hatching out. Go down the beach, and with that fat restore, with that yolk sac, they have about 24 to 48 hours of energy stored up in their system. So they're going to swim for about 24 to 48 hours straight until they reach, what we call the Sargasso Sea. So that's kind of this middle Atlantic gyre full of this sargassum seaweed, which is going to be their primary habitat while they're hatchlings and small juveniles, anywhere from the ages of basically hatchling to about 10 to 15 years of age. We call those years the lost years because we really don't know exactly where they're going and what they're doing during these times. We kind of have an idea of what they're doing, but it's really hard to put tiny tags on tiny turtles. There's a lot of cool scientists that are doing a lot of really interesting research putting these tiny tags on tiny turtles, but it is something that is very, very difficult to understand the movements of these turtles. Those hatchlings and kind of juveniles are going to spend their early years in that sargassum munching on basically anything they can fit in their mouth. That be crustaceans, algae, unfortunately sometimes plastics. We've had a few hatchlings that have come in years past where they've passed small pieces of plastic, and the only way it gets inside them is if they ate it. And then once they've reached about 10 to 15 years of age or so, we'll start to see kind of an inwards migration. So they first have, while they're hatchlings, an outward migration from the shore. Then as they get older, they start migrating closer and closer to the continental shelf, and then right offshore on the east coast. Right around 20, 25 years of age is what we kind of call subadult. And then once our loggerhead sea turtles reach about 30 years of age is when they've reached sexual maturity. So that's what we consider an adult sea turtle. They're going to be hanging anywhere from, a few hundred miles offshore, close to 5 miles offshore, just depending on the time of year. Then sea turtle mating, usually happens right around February through March and into April. And we, actually this year we saw a pair of loggerhead sea turtles mating just right offshore Jekyll. We got a call, said there were some sea turtles, injured and stranded in the surf. We went out there, me and my team, we grabbed our stranding board. Everybody, got ready, got all the things out of their pockets to get nice and wet. And then I was like, hold up, before we ran into the water, that's two turtles. And we saw two mating pair of turtles just right off the beach on Jekyll, which is, very rare to see them that close, and even more rare to see them mating that close. But just the tides were right and pushed them on shore. It was very, very interesting to see. Then the females are gonna mate with multiple males during mating season. And then they can actually store. One of my favorite facts to tell people is the females can actually store sperm of a male for up to 4 years. So she can mate once and then not mate for 3 or 4 years and then come up and still lay a sexually reproductively active nest that will produce viable offspring, which is mind-boggling to me. Um, Another interesting thing is since she's mating with multiple males, she can actually have multiple paternities, multiple fathers in these sea turtle nests. So it could be one large clutch of 100 eggs, but it could have 3 or 4 different fathers in those nests, which is really awesome. And then the cycle starts over again. Those eggs incubate for 45 to 60 days. They hatch out, and those hatchlings are starting their own journey.
Neat. So, do loggerheads, along with a lot of other turtles, do they also have a cosmopolitan range?
They kind of do. So we see our loggerhead sea turtles basically anywhere from South Florida all the way into the Caribbean, up to beaches up in Virginia. Our loggerheads are very widely distributed around the world. Same goes for our green sea turtles, leatherbacks, and hawksbills. We do see our green sea turtles, leatherbacks, and hawksbills primarily staying in more warmer waters when they're nesting. So as we get further up the East Coast, we primarily see more and more loggerheads, and the further south we go, we still see the same amount of loggerheads, but we see additional amounts of other species like green sea turtles and leatherbacks. And one of the primary nesting beaches in the world for green sea turtles, leatherbacks, and loggerhead sea turtles is right dab smack right around Cape Canaveral, Florida, in the middle of Florida, which is the Space Coast, which is really cool. And I think colleagues of mine down there currently have documented in the beach they're currently working on, just about a 5-mile stretch of beaches. They have about 10,000 loggerhead nests, 10,000 green sea turtle nests, and a few thousand leatherback sea turtle nests. So we see some hot spots around the East Coast, but we do see a wide distribution of species around the world. And then we have one species, our Kemp's Ridley. Actually, I should say 2 species, Kemp's Ridleys and flatbacks. They are primary nesters to specific areas. So starting with our Kemp's Ridleys, they're nesting, we do see some nesting along the East Coast, but their primary nesting is about a 250-mile stretch of beaches ranging from basically Corpus Christi, Texas, down to Rancho Nuevo in Mexico. So that, kind of 250 miles of stretches of beaches are their primary nesting habitat. So we see upwards of 20,000 Kemp's Ridley sea turtle nests just in those stretches of beaches, and maybe get 1 or 2 on the East Coast every single year. So they're primary nesting in the Gulf of Mexico. And then our flatback sea turtles, which are very, cryptic species, they only nest in Australia. They don't nest anywhere else in the world. So we only see them nesting in Australia, which is very interesting. And, there's some hypotheses as to why, these specific turtles are specifically nesting on these beaches. But, with sea turtles in general, we don't know a lot. We like to think we do, but we have some good leading hypotheses as to why they're doing what they're doing, but we still have a lot of unanswered questions.
So, what would some of the big unanswered questions be with sea turtles?
Oh, that's a good question. I think for me personally, one of the big unanswered questions, and with a lot of questions in the sea turtle community as well, is our lost years for these hatchlings. Is where they're going. We don't really know. We know they go out to the sargassum. We know a kind of very simple diet that they're eating, but we really don't know a lot about what they're doing. From when they're hatchlings up to basically an adult. We have a general maybe idea of, okay, yeah, maybe this is what's happening, but we don't have that concrete, okay, yeah, this is exactly what they're doing. That's why we've termed it the lost years, because they get lost. We don't know what happens.
No. Okay. Let's see here. So, what are some other things about sea turtles that you would like to find answers found to?
Ooh, we do know with our, what we call the Northern Recovery Unit, or the NRU and Northern Recovery Regional Unit, basically stretches of beaches from Virginia all the way down to St. Augustine Beach in Florida. We have a very large collaborative genetics project. So we take one egg from each of our nests, and we have permits to collect these eggs from loggerhead sea turtles. We sacrifice this one egg, and we take the eggshell and we send it up to the University of Georgia. And it's part of a large genetics project. So we're basically building family tree, ancestry.com, but for nesting sea turtles. So we can have this very large genetic profile of, how many nests this specific turtle is laying, where she's nesting, does she have any, grandmothers, daughters, mothers, sisters, cousins nesting in the same area? How many eggs is she laying? A lot of really, really important questions we can answer with just one egg. So we kind of justify the means of sacrificing that one egg to gain a larger understanding of, how these sea turtles are getting back to the same nesting beaches that they nest at every single year, answering questions of, how long sea turtles are sexually active and sexually mature. We've answered kind of a few of those questions. We know with our genetics project, we have 2 grandmothers in our population in this Northern Regional Unit. So they have, daughters and granddaughters that are also nesting, and we know that based off genetics. So it's very, very cool that we have, a better understanding of how old these sea turtles can be and still being, sexually active and contributing to their population. As far as we know, they can, lay nests actively from basically 30 years of age up until, they pass away. So answering those questions with genetics is something that's very, very exciting. We've been running this project for past decade or so. So we have a lot of really awesome data that we've collected, and we can actually, it's in hopes that, by collecting these genetic projects, doing the conservation work that we're doing, in the next, I always like to say, I hope I run out of a job, because the reason I have a job is because, these sea turtles, they're doing okay, but they still need a little bit of conservation efforts. But I hope, in the future, I don't have to do what I do. I mean, I do love what I do, and I hope I can do it for the rest of my life. But, I want these sea turtles and these populations of sea turtles around the world to be, back to, the pre-1980s numbers that we were seeing, and, these species taken off the Endangered Species Act.
So, with sea turtles, do they only lay one clutch per laying season, or do they sometimes lay multiple clutches?
They might lay multiple clutches. So they lay anywhere, we see about an average of 2 to 8. Majority of them are laying on, the smaller side of that, usually 2 to 4 nests a year. We actually had a sea turtle, loggerhead specifically on Jekyll this year, lay 7 nests. So she has consistently laid high number of nests through her genetic history and her history here on Jekyll, and specifically this year she laid 7. There are other sea turtles on other islands in Georgia with colleagues of mine that I know that have laid upwards of 8 to 9 nests in the nesting season. So basically through nesting season, how it works is they have kind of 2 sets of oviducts where those eggs are developing. After they've mated with their males, they'll store that sperm, fertilize one side of their oviduct and fertilize the other. And those eggs are developing. They'll come up onto the beach. They'll do that whole nesting process, lay those eggs and return. And we see about an average of, they take about 10 to 14 days kind of break and resting period while they're recalcifying those other set of oviduct eggs and getting those ready to lay again. Then they'll come back up in about, that 10 to 14 day period, lay another nest, go back to the water and repeat that process throughout the nesting season. And we see that from May through, basically the end of July.
So theoretically, a female could have up to 800 offspring a season.
So that
Well,
leads into another thing.
More
They
clutches,
could
reduce
have
clutch size.
upwards of those 800 or so, nests and 800 kind of offspring. Sadly, statistically, hatchlings don't have the best odds. A lot of studies suggest, 1 in 100. Some studies are suggesting 1 in 1,000. So not the best odds as a sea turtle, and especially not the best odds as a sea turtle hatchling. But we also see not every single one of those eggs is going to fully develop and fully hatch out. So we can see our current kind of success throughout the state. Our average is about 70% of our eggs hatch out. So of the total number of eggs that are laid, about 70% of those hatch out. Here on Jekyll, we're a little bit higher. We have a little bit about 82% of our total eggs hatch.
Gotcha. Let's see. So, as hatchlings, pretty much everything can eat them. But once they've reached adult size, other than sharks, what are some other potential natural predators for them?
Yeah, some other natural threats is climate change. We see our oceans getting warmer, and the temperatures at which these nests are incubating at getting higher and higher every single year. So we've actually seen some of our colleagues down in the Caribbean and Indonesia are seeing leatherback sea turtle nests basically getting just cooked in the sand, where there's they have a 100% failure rate with their nests. They're actually having to document these nests, dig them up, and bring them back to incubation facilities to incubate them in hopes that these eggs develop, because they're seeing if they leave these eggs on the beach, they're just cooking in the sand because it's so hot. We also see with sea turtles, they have what we call temperature dependent sex determination. So they actually determined the sex of the turtle based on what temperature they incubate at. So we call this temperature this pivotal temperature. So anything above that is going to produce more female sex turtles, and anything below that is going to produce more male sex turtles. We always like to say hot chicks, cool dudes. It's a little easier term to convey to the public, our science and education. But there was a study with the colleagues of mine down in Australia in the summer of 2019. They put temperature loggers in their nests, and they, with previous studies, we know exactly what those, pivotal temperatures are for certain species. They range anywhere from basically 20 degrees Celsius upwards of 30 degrees Celsius. So that's Fahrenheit 80 to 87-ish degrees Fahrenheit. So down in Australia, they did the study where they were putting these temperature loggers in the nest while they were incubating. And with the previous studies looking at what pivotal temperatures were at specific stages of incubation, they could conclude that about 99.9% of every single nest they had on that small stretch of nesting beach produced female sex turtles. So they had a 99.9% female skew in those hatchlings that hatched out that year. Usually in conservation biology and kind of population genetics, we like to have more females because more females can produce more offspring than one male can reproduce with a lot of females. And we usually like to have a lot of females, but we could potentially see in the future, when we're having more and more female sex turtles reach adulthood, 30 to 40 years down the line from now, we're going to have less males and less genetic diversity, in our populations. Not saying that's going to happen, but it's something that could potentially happen with climate change. And we know this based off studies that we have done looking at, the temperature dependent sex determination and sex ratios in the nests.
So, other than saying ditching plastics and eating renewably sourced fish and seafood, what are some other things people at home could do to help with protection of sea turtles?
Yeah, I think, one of the biggest things is listening to this podcast, educating yourself. You might be, like I said, in Ohio, you've never been to a beach, you don't know what a sea turtle
I've been
is.
to a beach. We have
um,
Lake Erie, okay?
there you go.
It
That's
smells like
first one.
dead fish, but it smells like.
You know, you might come vacation down on the East Coast, or you might go vacation in the Caribbean, where we do have nesting sea turtle populations. And I love to go out on the beach at night, but just have that reminder of, oh, okay, there are nesting sea turtles here. They're affected by me. I'm going to come out. I'm going to bring my red light flashlight. So specific turtle safe, turtle friendly flashlight. You can go on Google red light flashlight. They're maybe 10, $15. Pick you up one of those before you go to the beach. Walking the beach, and if you do see a sea turtle on the beach, consider yourself very lucky. It's we as sea turtle biologists kind of see it all the time, but it's still very exciting for us. And as somebody who doesn't work with sea turtles, I'm sure it's even more exciting. I mean, that's awesome. But respecting these animals, giving them space. Don't walk right up to them, but give them 50 to 100 feet of space. Let them do their thing. Don't touch them. They are protected species here in the U.S. It is illegal to handle, hold, touch, poke, or prod sea turtle hatchlings, eggs, and adult sea turtles, without proper permits and protocols and training. So just respecting wildlife, educating yourself on the do's and don'ts with sea turtles, as well as doing your part to let other people know how awesome sea turtles are.
And where can people find out more about the Georgia Sea Turtle Center?
Yeah, so we have a website. We're actually through the Jekyll Island Authority. You can either Google Georgia Sea Turtle Center, or you could go to the Jekyll Island Authority website slash Georgia Sea Turtle Center. We also have Facebook page, Instagram, so you can find us there at the Georgia Sea Turtle Center as well.
All right. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I think that's it. I could honestly talk about sea turtles for hours, but I think we've hit kind of the big things. Anything else you want to know?
Uh, Not really. So, uh,
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you having me.
it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely.